Coming up on Theater Talk.
There's a diet, there's a certain amount of water to drink, a certain amount of sleep, just things so that I don't need to be using all of my focus for, can I physically make this happen?
So what's the Evan Hansen diet?
Yeah, that's what I want to know.
I get very skinny.
It's a scoop. What's the Evan Hansen diet? Theater Talk is made possible in part by the CUNY TV Foundation and the Honorable Thomas Mercer Ray.
When you're falling in a forest and there's nobody around, do you ever really crash or even make a sound? When you're falling in a forest and there's nobody around, do you ever really crash or even make a sound? Did I even make a sound? Did I even make a sound? It's like I never made a sound. Will I ever make a sound?
From New York City, this is Theater Talk. I'm Susan Haskins. Michael Riedel is somewhere out of the country, and I am joined by my substitute co-host, Jesse Green, drama critic for New York Magazine.
Hi, Susan.
Welcome, Jesse. And we are going to talk about one of the biggest new musicals of this season, Dear Evan Hansen.
Today we have with us three of the stars of the show. We have Ben Platt, who plays the title character, Rachel Bay Jones, who plays his mother, and we have Jennifer Laura Thompson, who plays the mother of another character, which we'll get into. Welcome.
Thank you.
Thanks for having us.
So we should first talk about the rather unusual story of Dear Evan Hansen, because the way these three characters come into each other's lives is not something you're used to seeing in a Broadway musical. Who's going to tell us what Dear Evan Hansen is about?
You tell it good.
Okay. I have sort of a patented synopsis, if you will.
Yeah.
So Dear Evan Hansen is a brand new musical. It's not based on any previous material, which I always love to talk about because that's very exciting for all of us. And it's about a very profoundly lonely kid named Evan Hansen, who I get to play, who's 17 years old. He's a senior in high school, and he has a lot of trouble connecting to people and feels very isolated through social anxiety and through sort of the hyperconnectivity of social media, where everybody's sort of instantaneously judging one another and sharing sort of every whim and thought and emotion, and that kind of pulls him further and further into himself. And he has a single mother who's working very hard to sort of sustain both of them and is around as much as she can, but they have sort of a strained relationship when the show begins. And essentially, Evan gets caught up in this sort of web of lies in which he fabricates a friendship with a kid in his class who has committed suicide. And through this lie, becomes very close to the grieving family of this kid, of whom Jennifer plays Cynthia Murphy, who's the mother of this kid who has committed suicide. And Evan sort of helps this family to heal in this friendship that he invents with their kid, and sort of gives them a false view of who their son really was. And in doing so also gives himself sort of a new place to belong and to be heard and to feel that he can come into his own and be confident, although it's all predicated on this very horrible lie. And essentially it's sort of about kind of sifting through whether they're made-up connections or internet connections or online connections, or sort of finding the real human ones at the end of the day that make any kind of real difference, I suppose, is what the show is really about.
But Evan doesn't do any of this maliciously.
Certainly not. I'm sure I've made it sound horrible, but no, no, not at all. There's an inciting incident that I don't want to give the details of away because it's a wonderful scene where he finds a letter that he writes gets misconstrued, and essentially he finds himself sort of unable to deny this at first and falls very much accidentally into this lie, although then very much takes an active role in deciding to keep it going because he sees what a wonderful thing that it does for, especially for Cynthia and for her husband and for their daughter Zoe, who he also has a lot of feelings for. And sees his actions having such a positive, beautiful effect on these people, and sort of gets so intoxicated by what he's able to give them that he can't kind of
However, with the laws of dramaturgy, we know a lie has been told.
Yes.
And the one thing, this is a very unpredictable thing, but we know the lie will be revealed. Not a spoiler alert.
Or maybe he gets away with it and no one ever finds out.
Yes, or that could happen too.
But that anxiety.
Yes, there's always
oh
the
my God,
anxiety.
what's gonna happen?
Yeah. This is built on a fabrication.
But one of the really interesting things about the show is that it leaves open the question of whether, even though it was a lie, was some good done. We know some bad was done, but the relationships that Evan develops with your family, I'm going to say you, with your family, have in fact improved their lives, and that the show seems to suggest that remains after the lie is revealed or isn't revealed. So as much as the show has a tremendous amount of social media going on, in fact visually the design concept is largely based on social media with projections and an almost overwhelming amount of verbiage constantly coming at you, it is still a family or a families musical in the way that we're discussing. So let's go back for a minute and talk about how you each came into the project and how you developed a sense of family among you. Were you all with it from the beginning?
Yes.
Yeah.
All
That's kind of astonishing, isn't it?
Yeah.
very.
The three of us were there.
Now, who brought you in? Michael Greif?
I don't know about you, but Michael Greif brought me in.
Yeah.
Michael
That's the
Gray.
director,
I didn't know what it
Michael
was,
Michael
but I
Greif.
said, yes, whatever he's doing, I want a part of it.
And he's not here today because he's busy directing
That other musical.
another
Those
You're
ladies.
not his only musical. I hate to tell you. Daddy has
Got some
another wife.
newbies in it, and,
Two
very
other wives.
unproven stars.
Pretty fabulous lives.
So did Michael Greif bring you in?
Sort of. So I had auditioned for Benj and Justin, the composers, Pascal and Paul, for their musical Dogfight of a bit earlier, I think about a year or so earlier, or a year and a half. And they told me that I was too young, but then reached out to me afterwards on social media and said, well, Benj Pasek, and said,
Wait, really on social media?
very much on Facebook, like I have the messages, and said, your audition was wonderful, and we are happy to know you, and we have this other thing in development that we think maybe down the line you're going to be right for, so just sort of, I would love to stay in touch. And, I thought that's very kind, but things like that never really come to fruition. But I became very friendly with Benj, and he came to see me in Book of Mormon, and, I stayed in touch with the two of them very much. And then I had also auditioned for Michael for Next to Normal when that had gone on tour when I was in high school. And so I kind of knew them but through these missed opportunities, but then one day I was contacted and they said, we're going to sit down and do this first reading, and we would like you to come in and sort of see what the cold read is like with you and the character, if there's any sort of synergy. And they wouldn't let me, I don't know if you guys got to know anything beforehand, but they wouldn't let me
Nothing.
know a single thing until we flipped open the book. Didn't know who I was playing, how old I was, what the story, what the premise, nothing.
Right.
And we just sat
That's
down.
fun.
Cold.
And
They
all three
said
of us-
go.
Yeah.
So
And
what did it
read
say
out
for you?
loud. Yeah.
I mean, you open it, and what does it say about this?
Nothing. The first
Nothing.
lines. It's Evan's first monologue. Well, which was very different in the very beginning, but it did always start with him trying to write this letter to himself. And I just sort of the fact that all three of us were there the very first day was such a rare thing. I feel like, and I think we all just sort of watched it unfold and read through it in a way that was trying to sort of obviously make our mark right away and prove that we were worthy to be there, but also like we just wanted to find out what happened.
know
It
what
was-
happened.
I think it was impossible not to be enveloped in the script, even though we didn't know what was going on. Reading it felt like I was experiencing it, and I remember all of the emotions were there for all of the moments that were prominent in the show, and yours very clearly were just like so strong in the role. It's like we all were instantly connected with it, and we're. I speak for myself, and I think for the two of you that we never wanted to let it go.
This is a new musical. That is, it's an original idea based on nothing. Well, we shouldn't say based on nothing. It's
That's stuff
based
Jerry
on.
Seinfeld.
But Benj Pasek told us that this was actually based on minorly on a situation that he'd encountered in high school,
Yes.
where there was somebody pretending to be friends with somebody who died.
Yeah.
Sort of. I think it was the phenomenon of sort of someone in his class becoming a posthumous celebrity and sort of examining the psychology of people wanting to be part of a tragedy that they weren't necessarily really.
But I just want to get back to the rarity, first of all, of a Broadway musical that fits that category.
Sure.
But then also that we're sitting with three people who have been with it from the beginning. Now, you sort of expect that when a brand new piece of material is being developed, naturally they're going to be changing characters, they're going to be eliminating this, adding that, and no one expects the same people to emerge at the end, kind of still holding a little scrap of flag, to actually do the show. I mean, in your experience, you're a younger actor on Broadway, and you are younger as well. You've had more experience as younger actors. Do either of you have an experience like this in your background? That,
like Ben's?
well, no, like being on a new show from the
Oh,
very first to the.
For me, it was Urinetown, but there was a previous production of it at the Fringe Festival, so they did replace
So they
that
did
entire
replace, yeah.
cast. But that was the closest I came to really creating a unique.
Right.
And what about you?
You know, I think I've been involved with a lot of projects that never quite made it this far.
Right.
And then there were things that I couldn't continue on with because of conflicts, and I was fired once.
Idiots.
You have to do
Idiot.
that to learn.
Well, that's
Yes,
what I
and
said.
Okay,
but, you
goodbye
know,
then.
But what makes I wonder about, you tell me, is does this speak to the nature of Michael
Yeah.
Greif that he so carefully chose before he even went to that reading? Is he the kind of guy in his past, like with Rant, which he put together, and that he sticks to what he's put together because he's that confident?
He's very exacting.
Yeah,
There's, you know, I don't know if it goes to like, no, I think he's very willing to get rid of something. You know,
Right.
He's constantly honing.
But he saw these people, and rather than say, "Oh, no, that's a good," no, I'm shaping these people.
I think it was-
Incredible instincts.
Yeah,
Yeah.
He has-
that's what I mean.
And I think also a testament to Stephen Levinson, who wrote from the very beginning, even though there's lots of things that have changed and warped over time, the book had such specific human beings. And so I think immediately the three of us, and also Michael Park, who was in the very first reading as well, who plays her husband, Larry Murphy, just
Yes.
really clicked with these particular human beings. And I think that was very visible right away. And I think that they saw what there would be sort of to be gained by keeping the same real human beings.
And then
with
how much
these
were they shaping? I mean, they found you so remarkable. How much then did they shape of the book around you?
Story-wise, they have always been very smart about keeping it objective and making sure that the piece works as a whole. But as far as my performance individually, I think the nice thing was that I was able to really get to know Stephen, and we understand sort of the comic rhythm that I sort of like to use, and that we sort of had a lot of synergy as far as like, what works on my voice and
What doesn't work on your voice?
and as far as range, and I'm sure the songs have been written all with our voices in mind, and so things just become a lot more convenient when it can be collaborative, but never to the point where we would step on the narrative of these characters without us.
This is something that I was trying to get at before. There's, in a certain way, as new-fashioned as the material is, and as much as the theme of the show is not something that would have been on Broadway even 10 or 15 years ago, there is something old-fashioned about letting the artists do what they need to do, not workshopping them to death and making too many voices, making too many changes. I see that reflected both in the result, but also in the fact that you've all been in it from the beginning, that a lot of the material was written while, for you.
Certainly.
And music was written for you, and then I understand a lot of it was cut also, but then they didn't cut you. They then came back with another song or something like that. That's the way it used to work. You had who you had, and you worked with that. I think it's
Yes,
part of
and
why the
that-
show's so coherent.
Right, and that's sort of like reminds me of an off-Broadway way in. You have your people and you build with them. That's what makes it wonderful art.
Well, that's
Yeah.
what we love about theater
Yeah.
is the collaboration that's inherent in the art form.
Now, I want to ask you, there's much talk of this being social media being almost its own character in this, but as Jesse said before, there's a lot going on there on stage. There's just a lot going on visually and cues, and how do you handle that? I mean, I'm thinking of, with Wave Through the Window, that there's so much stimuli coming at you. Does that make it more difficult to keep your focus?
It sort of makes the job a little bit easier as
does.
far as being the character, because so much of him is so internal.
Yeah.
And so when there's so much coming at you in an external way, literally, as far as lighting cues and visuals and people yelling at you and singing at you, it sort of it forces you to sort of use the audience as an escape and sort of be like, can you help me get out of it? You know what I mean?
I have a question about that too, because
Sure.
I always think about that as from an actor's perspective, because it seems like the social media and all of the projections of this that you as the audience see are a manifestation of Evan's perspective,
Sure.
So how Evan can either see the world clearly, or if he's bombarded with all of this imagery and thoughts about what other people are saying and all of that. And that must contribute a lot to your anxiety in the moment, or
Very much so.
how does it feel for you being surrounded by all that? Does that
Certainly, it
Yeah.
feels in a really literal way a manifestation of wanting so badly to get out of your head but not being able to, which is what Waving Through Windows is essentially about, is feeling like you can't be present and be with people, and you feel like you're always sort of, as much as it's about sort of literally not belonging or not being part of the sort of the social group that you want to be part of, it's also just about sort of not being able to escape the prison of your mind to like be one-on-one with somebody. And so I think with all that stuff in the way, there's so much to fight through, which is why I think it's such a compellingly staged number, because he's literally having to fight through all of this stuff. And
Yes.
Meanwhile, the mothers exist in a kind of a different world. As I recall, neither mother is particularly involved in the social media stuff. If she were, she might know earlier on what was going on instead of being, blindsided by it. So I'm reversing the question you asked Ben to you, because that stuff is not in her mind.
Right, and there are times where I have to focus so hard on my son or what's going on in my own mind, rushing around trying to, but there are moments where we are slam up against social media, where the mothers are, where everybody is faced with it for different reasons. And when that happens, I find it physically overwhelming. Like the way that it moves, our stage is on a rake, it's very black, there's a lot of light coming at you, and then there's all of a sudden all of these visual images. And if we're allowing them in as actors and as characters, that there have been times, I think, too, in our technical rehearsals where I would feel like I was going to fall.
Yeah, definitely.
Like I was going to fall down because, and I think about that sometimes when I spend too much time on my phone and on Twitter and on, whatever, that I feel like I have to stop this right now. I have to stop. It feels like that when you're on stage with all of this stuff coming at you. But so there are times, and I think our scenes together, there's a stillness about it.
Well, from an audience's point of view, thank God. I mean, you need those, even if the plot didn't need them, the audience needs them.
certainly.
Yeah.
Yeah, so
Our
you two
scenes-
with your very serene household that he
Right.
comes in to visit. Serene, but laden with grief.
Yeah.
And I think that the because the whole beginning of the show has a lot of sort of that frenetic energy, especially for Evan. What I love about Cynthia and Evan's relationship is that when he sees what such a sort of beautiful healing is possible through what he's saying to her, she becomes the only person that he feels comfortable enough to continue to sort of look at and have eye contact with and be with and
That's so
connect with.
They have the only
Jealous,
sofa in the neighborhood, apparently. So, of course, it's going to
But
be.
then you do bump over. You do bump over to her daughter.
That's
Yeah.
true.
Yeah,
You do look at her at some point.
Yeah, it's hard not to look.
I mean, stunning
Laura
vision.
enjoyed
But now this plot is so emotionally intense. I mean, just so you go through so much. When you're done with the performance, is it hard to get over? Can you shake it off right away, or
We've talked about this a lot because for Cynthia, I launched right into the mourning of my son with no backstory.
yeah, we first see you after your son's dead, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Well, you
Yeah.
see me at the kitchen table.
As
and
I
he's
recall,
going to
yeah,
school
yeah.
high, but everything's normal, and then suddenly it's all gone. So to launch right into that is really difficult, and then from there, the story and the connections that we make in the For Forever scene are very natural. It's just so, it comes so easily, and but there are many times after words fail, which is a giant reveal, that I can't stop the tears. I can't.
Wow.
I have to just ride it out.
Oh.
But I don't go home and cry at night.
Uh-huh.
So that's good.
You have children, yes?
I have one
You have a
son.
child, so good. I'm glad you don't go home weeping at night.
Do you just shake it off when it's over?
It's hard, though. There is a gentle uplift, and there's finally a connection. So, for me, there's a lot of it's a lot of agitation throughout, and then there's a lot of adrenaline. There's a lot of reveals. There's a lot of revelation in this show.
Yeah,
And
there
so
is,
there's tons of adrenaline, and the adrenaline that's required to have the shock and the rage and the devastation that comes about after all of these is really hard to come down from. I'm up till 3 o'clock in the morning, easy. But there's a lot of, like, the catharsis that's inherent in this relationship is quite beautiful, though the release of that is kind of difficult. And I have really a wonderful, our hair supervisor, Daniel, tells me a joke every day as soon as I get off stage.
Oh, that's
And,
quite nice.
Yeah, and I learned it from Patti LuPone, actually. When she came off stage, when I did Women on the Verge, she would come off stage from a very intense number that she had, and her dresser would smack her on the butt, and she would laugh and tell jokes or whatever, and I thought, that's great, and she said, you have to do that, you have to do that. And so it really helped. The stage manager hands me a
his
wad
phone.
of tissues, and I come up off stage like, and my hair supervisor says, and tells me a joke, and it's completely goofy, and even if it's terrible, they're always clean. But it sort of switches something in your brain,
Yeah.
and I think that's what we do as a company for each other. We talk about this a lot. We laugh all the time off stage.
Well, so you'll always hear about how the company of a musical in particular becomes a family. I want to talk briefly about this particular challenges when the company is also playing a family, or two families in this case. You're actors, so you do what you have to do. You create the characters and the relationships. But would you be able to do it if you really hated each other? I mean...
No. I mean, I think not in this piece. I think that we get a lot of beautiful responses of people feeling like these humans feel so lived in and that they feel so sort of emotionally free with each other, which is what I think makes the story work and makes the story so honest. And so I think that is a huge testament to, A, the fact that we've been doing it together for so long, and B, the fact that we all really respect one another and all know how badly we all want the piece to be good and how everyone's really giving their whole selves.
And we care for each other. There's a care.
Deeply.
We
Yeah, there's a
constantly
care.
lift
And
each
going back
other
to
up.
your director, do you think he would have kept anybody that he sensed?
No.
No.
We don't only have a couple minutes left, but I wanted to ask you, you were talking to us about you have a voice lesson before 2 performances a week, including today, so I'm
Sure.
grateful you're here.
Yes,
but
of course.
you're on stage practically the whole time of this show, just
indeed.
singing, remarkable voice. And
Thank you.
how do you keep it together?
There's a lot of things in place to sort
Yeah.
of make it sustainable. I have 2 physical therapy sessions a week that are sort of geared towards not having me slowly take on Evan's posture in my real life, and
doing.
which I literally, I do too, and I buy my
Yeah,
nails,
because
of
he's a
course.
very armored, stressed out guy. And
very, very
yeah.
spindly and sort of
Yeah.
turned in all the time.
Some people say that he's on the autism spectrum or has learning disabilities. Do you have that in your performance?
No, I think that it's open for interpretation. I didn't want to make it such a specific kid in that way because I wanted everybody to be able to see themselves in him and sort of take what they can from him and be as universal as possible. I don't think that that's out of the question. And I think that if somebody comes that applies to their lives, that they should totally take that away. But I don't think it's like, for example, Curious Incident, where it's very specifically about that issue. I don't want it to be that. And so I didn't study any particular sort of person on the spectrum or anything like that.
Well, that spectrum is so
big. Oh,
Yeah, we're all on that
We're all
spectrum.
there.
When someone
But
says
Truly.
that
It's
word,
been
they
interesting
think,
to watch him develop your physical mannerisms too, because they've been born out of an emotional place,
Sure.
which has been so beautiful, and out of the writing. And we've watched this metamorphosis take place.
And there's your father, your real father, who's never there, who's left before the musical even began. But we don't forget him, that you are a kid who doesn't have a father and
Certainly.
whose mother has to make do for you.
Yeah.
Yeah. So in your armored unhappiness, one wonders. Now go back to your physical therapist.
Oh, sorry. Yes, so just 2 of those a week, 2 voice lessons a week, just to maintain and make sure everything's coming from a healthy place consistently and we're navigating any sort of weather or sickness, whatever. There's a diet, there's a certain amount of water to drink, a certain amount of sleep, just things so that I don't need to be using all of my focus for, can I physically make this happen?
So what's the Evan Hansen
Yeah,
diet?
that's what I want to know.
they get very skinny.
It's a scoop. What's the Evan Hansen diet?
Well, I just figured he's a kid that really can't stand to eat too much, and when I saw him in my mind, he was always, nobody ever asked me, the team was like, you need to get thin, but I just sort of always saw him that way. I don't eat gluten, I don't eat dairy. That's the main thing. And then it's just about like what times of day I eat. I don't want to be jiggling around food on stage and, digesting at the right times, things like that.
Okay.
I see a brand extension here for Dear Evan
The Evan Hansen diet.
And then there's the Heidi Hansen diet,
Merchandising.
which is all cookies.
And funny.
You're not on that diet. all right?
I totally am. Actually, that's what gets me out of the sadness every night.
Chocolates.
We have Dear Evan Hansen, a tremendous success now at the Music Box Theater, running until for a long time, but right now we have the original cast.
Rachel Bay Jones, Ben Platt, and Jennifer Laura Thompson.
Thank you so much for being here at Theater Talk.
Thank
course.
you.
Good show tonight.
Thank you.
Today is the last day at CUNY TV and thus at Theater Talk for the extraordinary Raven Howard, who is a production associate, a camera person, and the person who tells you the truth. Raven, I'm going to miss you so much. Have a good life.
Get out of here.
All right. Your publicists are nipping at my heels. So.
Step out of the sun because you've learned. On the outside, always looking in, will I ever be more than I've always been? 'Cause I'm tapping on the glass. I'm waving through a window. I try to speak, but nobody can hear, so I wait around for an answer to appear while I'm watching people pass. I'm waving through a window.
Can anybody see? Is anybody waiting back at me? Is anybody waiting?
Our thanks to the Friends of Theater Talk for their significant contribution to this production. Theater Talk is made possible in part by the Frederick Lowe Foundation, the Corey and Bob Dinelli Charitable Fund, the Noel Coward Foundation, Carrie J. Fries, the Dorothy Strelson Foundation, and the New York City Department of Cultural Affairs.
We welcome your questions or comments for Theater Talk. Thank you.